Hello, my name is Anna Ralph, and this is my submission for Operating System Platforms Lab Assignment 1. I will be demonstrating the provisioning of a dual boot virtual machine using Oracle VirtualBox, installing Linux, Cinnamon, and Windows 11, and configuring the boot hierarchy. First, I will be sourcing my assets. I have downloaded the official Windows 11 Multi Edition ISO and Linux Mint Cinnamon ISO. First, by going to Windows 11, selecting my download file, and then the language of which you want the product to be. In this case, it's English for me. Then you click on the download button. As I've stated before, I've already downloaded it, so I don't need to do it again. Same to with Linux Mint. Go to the Linux Mint site, clicking on the first link, and navigating to the Downloads tab. I chose the Cinnamon Edition, click on the Download button. Your choice of preference as to which one you would like to use. Scrolling lower down, you see a varied amount of links. Any link you click on will work. I chose first one. As stated previously before, I already have the ISO files. I don't need to download it again. Heading over now to the virtual machine, where you'll click New, then name the virtual machine. In this case, it was Dual Boot VM. We must explicitly tag the container as Windows 11 type profile, even though we are going to be installing Linux first, because the VirtualBox uses this profile to automatically adjust optimize hypervisor settings behind the scene, especially selecting Windows 11 enables certain firmware by default and configures the virtual chipset and ACPI settings appropriate for modern operating systems, which prevents boot failure. To computationally verify that an ISO file's integrity is intact, a systems administrator generates a cryptographic hash, specifically a SHA-256 checksum of that downloaded file using a command line tool. They then compare this generated hash against the official checksum published on the vendor's website. If the string matches perfectly, the file is verified as authentic and uncorrupted. First, after selecting the Windows 11 ISO file in the ISO image section, I will then input a password and confirm a password of my choice or your choice. Then I will set the RAM to 4 gigabytes and the disk space to 25 gigabytes. I'm doing so instead of the lab's 15 gigabytes because the Linux Cinnamon Edition that I chose needs 16.1 gigabytes to run, or an error code will be displayed. Upon research, I have come to the conclusion that 25 gigabytes is enough space for Linux to run proficiently. Optical drive versus VDI. The fundamental structure difference is that optical drive is a subsystem is designed for read-only temporary media like ISO files. It acts as a virtual CD tray. In contrast, the native .vdi hard disk is a persistent read-write virtualized physical drive that retains data, file stem, states, and partition tables across reboots. Also, to the question as what is a live desktop, in virtualization context, a live desktop means the operating system is running entirely within the host machine's volatile RAM without making permanent changes to the virtual hard disk. This stateless live operational state is useful to a system engineer for testing bare metal physical server components because it allows them to verify hardware compatibility and load drivers in a safe sandbox without risking corruption of an existing production OS. Now, after powering off the machine quickly before it has a chance to start by clicking the power off machine button on OK, we'll then navigate to the storage section where it says port 1 and we will be installing the Linux Cinnamon ISO file. Clicking Start, the installation of Linux Mint Cinnamon Edition will now begin. Hit and enter on your keyboard to start Linux Mint Cinnamon Edition. It may take a few minutes. And we're back and Linux Mint has started up. Navigating to the install of Linux Mint, click on it. And here we're just going through the installation process, choosing the language as well as keyboard style. It's your choice to include the installation of the multimedia codes. It's not needed, however, I chose to do so. Continuing along, you'll just click Install Now. And we're back, where you just state where you are, just continue, as well as enter your name, as well as a password and confirm your password. For ease of convenience, click the login automatically so that way each time you come into the virtual machine, you don't need to enter your password every single time. Then click continue and here now the installation process will now start. And we'll be back when it's finished. Following along, press restart, then press enter, then press enter again to continue boot. You may need to restart your machine by simply Xing out and powering off machine and then starting again. And here we go. Linux Mint is up and running proficiently and successfully. Powering off the machine, will now exit and start the installation of Windows 11. Powered off state. A virtual node must be in a total powered off state before altering virtual hard disk geometries because the .vdr file is actively locked by the hypervisor process when the machine is running or saved. Attempting this adjustment on a saved or running machine would cause systematic issues, including severe file corruption or hypervisor crashes because the disk's metadata is actively in use. The next step is to increase the size of the visual disk. Here we can see the name of the visual disk, which is dualboot.vdi under storage, where you see port 0. And we will now look for this name in the media manager. Now opening the media manager, we'll now look for this name and then click on properties. Where we will now allocate 60 gigabytes for Windows 11, totaling to the amount of 85 gigabytes on top of the 25 gigabytes allotted for Linux. Now that the disk has been resized, we will now insert the Windows iOS file to the optical drive and click Start to install. Turning on the virtual machine and rapidly tapping the Escape button to interrupt the boot sequence. Using the arrow keys, we will then select Boot Manager. Then select Virtual CD-ROM Drive to force load the Windows 11 setup. And now, with an extra step needed to bypass security measures and restrictions imposed by Windows 11, which is needed as without it, the Windows 11 will not be able to be installed onto the virtual machine. And to do so, we will click on Shift and F10 to open the command line. Here, we'll start the registry by typing out regedit. Then we browse to HKey local machine, system, setup, where we'll add a key called lab config. Two values will then be added. Both will be dword 32-bit. The first being bypass TPM check, and the second will be bypass secure boot check. Then you'll change the values of both to 1 by right clicking on Modify and changing to 1. Now we'll head back to the installation, click on Next, check in the box, Next. I don't have a product key. This will take some time, so we'll be back when it's finished. Here you can see our additional 60 gigabytes where Windows 11 will be installed. We'll be back when it's finished, as it will take some time. Keep in mind that this will take a varied amount of time, and sometimes you may need to actually restart your machine by powering it off and then starting it again. So feel free to do so if it is that you're seeing that it takes at least more than 10 minutes for it to start and boot up. So now that we're back, following through the system of setting up our Windows 11, we bypassing the updates, and here we can see that the Windows 11 is up and running. Now, if we want to use Linux, we will restart the machine and quickly press Escape. And now in the UEFI menu, we go to Boot Manager and then change boot order and then enter for Ubuntu and click the plus sign to change order and enter. And then Y to save. And then reset. The virtual machine then restarts. The fundamental purpose of stepping into the raw UEFI motherboard workspace via the escape key instead of letting the machine boot naturally is to interrupt the default boot order. It allows the engineer to manually override the sequence and select the CD-ROM drive, which is essentially when installing a new OS that isn't yet the primary boot device. Also, let's talk about file system permissions. File system access permissions differ significantly between these environments. Linux uses an extension 4 file system with POSIX style permissions based on user group ownership. Windows uses NTFS with access control lists. While Linux mounts the NTFS partition, it uses a translation layer like NTFS3G to map Windows ACLs to POSIX permissions, allowing read visibility but not native enforcement of Windows security boundaries. Earlier, I modified the boot order priority table by placing Ubuntu at index number 1. As the machine restarts naturally, you can see the VM automatically defaults to Linux Grub bootloader first. Grub acts as a primary boot manager. It detects the Windows boot manager on the adjacent partition and presents a menu, providing a window to access either operating system engine on demand. And here on the Linux system, you can see that you can access the Windows files on the Linux system. So now I'm going to show you how to enter and use Compiz Fusion. However, note that if you're on the Linux Cinnamon Edition, this does not apply to you. Begin by going to the Control Center. Then you'll enter Desktop Settings. Then change the Windows Manager to Compiz. And then you can go into Configure Compiz to enter the Compiz Settings Manager, or type CSM in the menu and it will come up the same way. And you can click on it there. Then there'll be a little pop-up that says to be careful, so just heed that warning. Going into the general options, go to desk size and ensure horizontal value is 4 and vertical value is 1 to enable the cube to work, to allow the cube to work, sorry. If your cube isn't working, that may be a reason why, so check that first. Then if you don't have the viewport switcher on, I have it on already, but when you disable it, because it usually comes disabled, and you click Control Alt and an arrow key, this is what you'll see because the cube is already running. And then when you put on the virtual switcher and you hold down the mouse wheel and drag or rotate, you'll be able to see the cube itself. So mouse wheel, hold down and drag, and there you go. This is how to enable the Compiz config to show the rotating cube.